ฟรีไปเลยค่ะอีก1 กิโลกรัมค่ะโปรโมชั่นนี้มีให้คุณถึงวันที่17 สิงหาคมนี้เท่านั้นนะคะ
หมายความว่าซื้อ
But it's still a test that needs to be supervised. You have to spit under supervision, and then you have to send it off for testing. It is not a home test. Home tests are being devised. Just approved is not that. All it essentially does is replace the long swab that goes into the back of your nose with a saliva test. There are some simplifications of the reagents which they claim may make things faster. It's not the reagents that make things slow. It's bad bureaucracy that makes things slow.
Well, let's hope in some way that problem with testing can be solved. William Hasseltine, thank you so much for talking with us. We do appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
The World Health Organization says there is a new phase of the pandemic defined by younger people catching and spreading the disease. Now, this is happening now in Asia-Pacific countries, and the WHO's regional director for the Western Pacific says it's not just a resurgence, but a sign the pandemic is changing, with people in their 20s, 30s and 40s driving the spread. The WHO says some countries are seeing surges that in some cases are larger than the original outbreaks. And meantime, thousands of people gathered for a party in Wuhan, China, the former epicenter of this pandemic. And you can see the audience packed in tightly for this concert at a water park with very few masks in sight. Wuhan reportedly hasn't seen any new coronavirus cases since May. Officials are hoping to boost the economy with the lockdown now lifted. And to do that, they have waived ticket fees at hundreds of tourist sites. Well, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is facing massive public anger, this time from students, parents and teachers. So the UK government has U-turned on plans to deal with exam grades in the COVID era. Because students could not take the all-important A-level exams when the country was under lockdown, the government had planned to rely on an algorithm for grades, but not anymore. CNN's Max Foster joins us now to explain. So, Max, what is the latest on this?
Well, the latest is that the fallout continues because after this farcical situation where students' grades were effectively upgraded after a huge amount of pressure on the government and the educational authorities, we now have a situation where many students, perhaps a third of students, have had their grades upgraded to the level where they now qualify for the initial courses they applied to at university. So take someone that had got a place at a top university, they thought they had a place and then they were effectively downgraded with their results. Now they've been upgraded, they can now get into that university. But a lot of those places were awarded to students last week after the initial set of results. So now we have students who did actually qualify for places, didn't get those places. And there's an example I heard this morning where a student has been allowed a place, but it's going to be deferred until next year. And she's obviously pointing out in lockdown what she's going to do with a gap year. So a real mess. And universities are putting a huge amount of pressure on the government to try to come up with some sort of solution here. The obvious solution is to create more places at top universities, but we have social distancing rules to consider right now, so that might not always be possible. And the universities outside the top tier also have an issue where they're losing students who now want to go from those universities to a top university. So a huge amount of pressure on students right now and pressure on the government. Calls in the British newspapers for the Education Secretary to resign. This, the Daily Mail, is a Boris Johnson government supporting newspaper. So a real situation for Boris Johnson and his government, but he's standing by his Education Secretary. He isn't expecting him to leave, so we'll see what happens. We saw a similar situation where his senior advisor, Dominic Cummings, was under pressure to resign, and Boris Johnson stood by him as well. So most people saying they're not going to see Boris Johnson basically sacking the Education Secretary anytime soon.
Yeah, so frustrating for those students. We're seeing a similar situation here in the US and, of course, around the world. Exams for these kids going into university having to be cancelled because of this pandemic. Very frustrating. Max Foster in Newbury, England, bringing us that live update. Many thanks. And still to come, not all Democrats see eye to eye. Can the party unite for the common goal of beating Donald Trump? Or is the Bernie or Bus Brigade back? We'll take a look.
We were globe-trotting, carefree, adventurous. King of the world! We saw things we'd only imagined.
Do you mind if I have my breakfast, Kelly?
And heard stories that reached in and stirred our souls. It's different now, but our wanderlust is still strong. Look at it! And we're getting ready to once again go and travel.
It's a world of wonder on CNN in association with Turkish Airlines.
A mask can say a lot about the person who wears it, but even more about the person who doesn't.
My name is Jason Boswell and I'm an underwater camera operator and technical diver based in Cape Town, South Africa. I normally get to spend my days out in False Bay getting to film all the amazing wildlife that lives in this incredible part of the world. Owing to the current situation, the beaches here have been closed and therefore access to the ocean is severely restricted, which means that I now spend my days on the deck using a pair of binoculars to look out longingly towards the ocean. I've been lucky enough to see massive pods of dolphins, maybe 500 or 600 strong. There's seals playing in the kelp forest. There's loads of bird life. Whilst it's been fun being dry docked on my deck and getting to look out on the ocean and see things from a bit of a different perspective, I'm really looking forward to the day that things normalize and you can get back out there.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
With racial injustice a central issue of this campaign, Democrats took time to remember George Floyd, the black man whose death under the knee of a white police officer sparked international protests calling for racial justice. George Floyd's brother honoured the many who have died because of hate and injustice. Here's his message to the convention.
It's a fitting legacy for our brother. But George should be alive today. Breonna Taylor should be alive today. Ahmaud Arbery should be alive today. Eric Garner should be alive today. Stephon Clark, Tatiana Jefferson, Sandra Bland, they should all be alive today. So it's up to us to carry on the fight for justice. Our actions will be their legacies. We must always find ourselves in what John Lewis called good trouble. For the names we do not know, the faces we'll never see, those who can't mourn because their murders didn't go viral.